Hey Troy, how are you today?
Fantastic. How about you?
Doing very, very well. I am intrigued, to say the least, to talk about you. How your relation to the publishing industry and writing, as well as Plotter, which will probably be the main focus of our conversation today. We'll get into why I am intrigued in just a minute. Before we dive into that, how long have you been writing and involved with Plotter?
So I've been writing full time since 2009.
Okay.
I wanted to be a writer when I was very young, and I just tell people, a few decades of career nets and name tags and figuring out that pretty much other than this, I was unemployable. And I figured I better make a go of this and make it work. And so I figured out a way to do that. There were a couple of things that happened at the beginning of my career that were very beneficial, a couple that were not so beneficial, but I learned from those things and kept moving forward. But Plotter is an interesting story because what happened 2017, the guy who developed Plotter for his own writing, he's a software developer by day. So he developed Plotter to help him with his own writing. And people kept saying, you should show that to people. That's a really cool idea. He said, okay. So he showed up at a writers conference in Utah where he lived at the time. My friend came out of the dealer's room, said, check out the software, you have to buy it. I walked in and saw about a 2 minute, 3 minute demo and went, I got to buy that. And so I bought it. And then my friend, who's also a software tester, who was there with me, is also a software tester. He sent them 8 bugs by the next morning that he found in the software.
Wow.
And and so we started conversing with Cameron, who's the founder, and he would ask me things like, what do you want as a writer? What things would make Plotter really awesome? And I said, well, now that you're asking, I have a list. And so I just kind of dumped a whole bunch of things on him, like, hey, I'd love to see this happen, love to see that happen. And he developed a lot of those things. So a lot of the features of Plotter are what we have now. But in 2020, Plotter kind of did a relaunch. And that's when everybody kind of started hearing about Plotter. I was one of like the first 100 people in the country to use it. And Ryan Z, who came in as our marketing director and a co-founder, said, hey, you do a lot for Plotter. Would you like to do more for us and get paid for it? I said, sure. Wait, I have to show up and talk to writers about plotting. All right, I guess I will. And so essentially, I just jumped right in, and I've been doing it ever since. And it morphed into way more and way different of a thing than I thought it was going to be. So it's been amazing.
Oh, cool. And what a really interesting way to, involve work type things with your writer business. I mean, there's a lot of people like myself have a work or a job that is completely unrelated to writing. I do technical operational work for a tech company. It's completely unrelated, but it's great. It's kind of a segue from your writing into a job that not only aids you in writing, but will help you have a better network for your business as an author. How cool. I think that's amazing. So you're the training director or some odd at Plotter. Is that what you do?
Um, the title is education lead, and what it really
Ah,
means is so I tell people two things. First, what it means is I write words, not code. So if you want to know
uh-huh.
how the app works, I'm the wrong guy to ask because I just say, hey guys, I would like you to make this feature. And they sometimes groan and complain and make that resting programmer face.
Yep.
And then they go and do it. And I don't care that it is hard for them to do because I just want it to work, right? And I love those guys. I mean, I love all the developers, but I'm not one of them. I'm the guy that teaches you how to use Plotter. So
Mhm.
because I'm a plot structure nerd, I mean a big plot structure nerd, I I love all kinds of plot structures. And if new plot structure comes out, somebody comes out with a new idea, I look at it. I look at it. I have plot structures that I've come up with myself. I have the Sleuth's Journey, which is one of the starter uh, plot templates in Plotter that I created. It's an adaptation of the hero's journey for mysteries. That's all that it is. Nothing special, nothing spectacular, but that's what it is, right? And so that has been that's what I do. So I go out and teach people how to use Plotter. I do webinars, I do podcasts, I do workshops, all kinds of stuff like that. Teach people how they can integrate this into their writing process. Because I fully integrated Plotter into my writing process from start to finish. I use it all along the way.
I mean, that's great. So you not only just know how to use it, but you know how it applies because you've used it in your writing. So what is Plotter? I mean, we've mentioned the name. I think people listening probably can assume what it is, but I want to hear from you. What is Plotter and why is it important for writers?
Well, so I kind of have my own names for it, and what I
Okay.
call it is more like a story management software.
Sure.
Because people sometimes are like, well, plotter, but I'm not a plotter. I'm a discovery writer or a pantser or whatever, right? Doesn't matter. You're still going to manage your story details and manage your planning somehow. Usually, what that means is you plan in the second draft instead of the first draft, right? Which, who cares? I don't care what draft you plan in. You're still planning. You're still plotting, right? Um, so it's there's the plotting and the outlining aspect of it, which is visual. It's kind of like, think of a digital corkboard, but with a lot more power than that.
Mhm.
The ability to filter by tags, filter by characters, filter by books. There's all kinds of things that you can do with those particular things, right? So a super powerful corkboard. You can move things around much more easily than you can. I mean, I used to use a real corkboard with like, and a whiteboard with like string and markers and just this nightmarish spider web of things in my office. It was horrible, to be honest. It was absolutely terrible. But anyway, and that's one of the reasons I gravitated towards Plottr, is because writers do tend to be very visual. They want a visual way to represent their stories,
Yeah.
right? But if you do it with a whiteboard or corkboard, it just gets really awkward. You can do it in a notebook, but then you can't really move things around. Anyway, so think of it that way. But the other aspect of it that's really important is your series Bible. And it was one of the first features that I asked for. And this is so you can track your characters not only throughout your books, but through your series. Because I put it to people this way. Okay, so like let's say you wonder what color were Susie's eyes in chapter 2. Well, if I go back and I read chapter 2, and I'm like, oh, Susie's eyes were blue, right? But then I go, well, that sentence is awkward. I should probably edit that sentence now. And oh, look, there's a detail I left out of this book. I should probably research that detail. How about I go to the internet? Now I'm on Google, Reddit, Quora, and I'm down this rabbit hole. And now I know everything in the world about this tiny little detail that was in my chapter 2 that I didn't need to research right now when I'm in the drafting period, right? And then I come back and I go, oh yeah, what color were Susie's eyes again? And I start out reading chapter. So instead you have those character details, the setting details, and all that stuff in one place where it's easy for me. Part of my process is I write in Scrivener, so I have Scrivener on one screen, Plottr open on the other, and in the Plottr file, I just have it open to my characters and places, and then I turn my head, look at the information I need, and then turn back. And I don't leave that writing environment and go down that rabbit hole that takes me clear into the universe that I don't
Hmm.
need to go in. So
So fun. So I'm laughing because all of this sounds amazing. I'd love to double click on a majority of what you've discussed, and we will in just a minute. I'm laughing because I am that pantser that
yeah,
you are describing. And when I say pants, I mean I write nothing down. There is no Bible for any of my books. There is no documentation of pretty much anything. Do I recommend that? Absolutely not. However, I have not done that. It just kind of comes out. And generally, I remember the details that I need. I've not had any problems with that. So I'd love to, playing the devil's advocate here, because I recognize the system like this is necessary for all writers, regardless of pantsing and plotting. But I'd love to hear your take on where does it really fit in for pantsers? I mean, you dabbled in it a little bit with the Bible and the characters and the locations and everything, but how can that be applied to a pantser's view of their writing experience?
well, one thing is, so this is where I tell people, because I've integrated Plottr into every part of my writing process. I use it for planning, but I'll tell you a secret, and I use it during the writing process, exactly like I talked about, to reference characters and places and stuff, right? But I'll let you in on a little secret. Just because I plan to write it doesn't mean that's what I actually write. I know that comes as a total shock because all people that outline their books follow their outlines exactly, and I'm obviously the exception to the rule.
Yeah,
Not
obviously.
true, right? Not completely, that's completely a lie, right? So you seldom write exactly what you have planned, right? So then I use Plottr again in the revision process. And this is where it comes in for pantsers, because I have someone like in my critique group I was talking to last night. She's written 3 novels, right? Didn't outline any of them, wrote them years ago. And now she has these massive blocks of text, essentially, right? She's got these massive novels that she's written that she wants to turn into something. And I say, well, you've got them written. And she's struggling with parts of the story. I'm like, you've got them written. Make a summary of each scene and put it in a plot card in a scene card on Plottr, right? and then figure out what order those events go in. You may not have written them in the right order. Some of them may not belong at all, but how do you figure that out before you go through and rewrite the whole thing again, still with no roadmap in mind? Instead, you go through the revision process, you block things out, and you go, okay, how did I do? It's kind of like checking your work. Like, I told myself this story in 110,000 words, but it's a thriller and it needs to be 60,000. So where do I cut? Well, let me check my work. Let me see how I did with a plot. And you can either line that up next to an established plot structure, like, the hero's journey or something like that, and see, do I have an inciting incident? Is there a midpoint to my book? Does this thing actually work? Is this actually a story, or is this just my, writer vomit? Because I had plenty of those in college, and thank goodness last time I saw them, they were WordPerfect 5 on a 3.5-inch drive,
Mm.
right? Never to be recovered again. I don't think you can even convert that anymore. I don't know. I don't
Probably
even know.
not.
I'm not gonna find out. I'm not even gonna find out. Those things deserve to stay back where they are. But as you learn with writing, you learn more that story structure is important, right? Regardless of how you write, when you come down to the end of it, you need a story that has a certain type of structure, certain types of structure based on genre and other things, right? That in order to make them commercially viable stories, right? Which is what things like Save the Cat and other story structures are all about, is about going back and looking at those things and going, why does this story work so well? Well, here's why. It's a 3-act structure. It has these things happening at this time in the story. So that's how a discovery writer can use Plottr and story structure in general to go back and check your work. But I mean, there are some people that don't ever do that either. They just use the series Bible, they go back and revise it, and they've developed such an innate sense of story that they can do that without a map and without an outline. Um, However, it usually takes them more drafts than it takes someone who plans a little bit. And what I will tell you, I mean, I always tell people too, the elephant in the room that we don't talk about in publishing now is, and it's always kind of been this way, is publishing is all about what have you done for me lately? Now that used to be what have you published in the last 3 years, right? When you were with traditional publishers and all that kind of thing. In the indie publishing market, it's what have you done in the last quarter? So we're talking about a lot faster production in order to actually make a living writing. Like, that has
Mm.
changed since I started making a living writing to now. That has changed exponentially, but it is super, super important. So when we say, hey, you need to write faster, if you're a discovery writer who's writing 6 drafts of your novel, how are you going to write faster? And you have to decide that for yourself. How am I going to improve efficiency? So part of what Plottr is about is adding a layer of efficiency into your entire writing process. For me, that's a business process. I tell people clearly I like to eat. My wife likes nice things. We have to make money, right? So
Hmm.
I have to figure that part of it out. So
Yeah, I mean, all of this makes absolute sense. I hear what you're saying. My case is a little bit odd. I've published 5 books now. Discovery written all of them, and I've done them in, I think, 2 drafts with each of the books.
all
So
good.
I'm a little bit of I'm an enigma. Let's just say that. Um, a lot of people read my books and they can't believe I didn't plan any of it, but I didn't. I'm convinced that my brain just somehow slotted all into place. But the series Bible and kind of the documentation of that is really what interests me. And I've said that before, because even as pantsers, even plotters, everybody, you just need these details somewhere in a clear
Mhm.
and organized way. Now, I downloaded Plottr a few days ago. I've been playing around with it. And it's not even overwhelming. It's relatively intuitive, which I think is amazing for a system
Mhm.
like this, because with systems like plotting or planning or outlining, or there's a lot of these writer resource systems, they're not always intuitive. Scrivener, for one, isn't super intuitive. I use Scrivener as well, and it's not super intuitive. So when I see something like Plottr, you can do some of the things in Scrivener that's in Plottr. It's just not as easy. It's uglier.
No.
It's just like a lot of extra steps, but Plottr is really beautifully outlined and very easy to use, which is I think all writers need. Their stories are already complex
Yeah.
enough. They don't need to learn a system to figure it
Yeah,
out.
listen, like when I first got Scrivener, okay, I tried to outline in Scrivener, but
Hmm.
the learning curve is very high, number one. And now I use Scrivener, but I use it for a very specific reason. I'm going to let the secret in the bag, right? Is so I do a lot of technical writing, blogging, stuff like that, right? And I do that in Word, and I do editing in Word. only write fiction in Scrivener.
Mm,
And the reason is it's a mental trick. I open Scrivener on my computer, my brain goes, oh, we're writing fiction.
mhm,
If I do anything else in Scrivener, it spoils that, right? So I used to use Scrivener for a lot of things that I no longer use Scrivener for. And there are other programs out there, Atticus being one of them, that I'm very interested in because if it develops to what they're aiming to develop it at, it could easily be a replacement for Scrivener for me, right? So it's very possible. I am a Scrivener user. I've used Scrivener for years, but I have a really difficult time going to a brand new writer and saying, yeah, download Scrivener. It's going to be great for you. I used to teach classes about Scrivener, and I would teach one called Speed Scrivener. And what I meant was, these are the bare minimum of features you should know how to use to make Scrivener work for you right now. Like, other than that, those all those complicated things that are in Scrivener, just leave them for now. Just get in there, and if you just want to write with it, this is what you need to do because it can be overwhelming from the time you open it. You're like, what is all this stuff?
mhm,
Plotter is where it's more intuitive, where if you just start typing stuff and moving stuff around, you're going to kind of figure some things out kind of on autopilot. It's really intuitive, relatively easy to use. There are advanced features. I just tell people just because an advanced feature is there doesn't mean you have to use it if you don't need
mhm,
it.
absolutely.
So,
I
yeah.
understand everything you're saying. I have Atticus too, coincidentally. So I have tried all sorts of things, and I'm staying in Scrivener for now. There's a history there with Atticus. We don't need to get into it, but I still have Atticus. And generally, what I find myself using Atticus for is more of the short story, kind of Kindle Vella serialized story type things in Atticus, and then my long form novels in Scrivener. Once again, there's a history there, but I can totally understand that using different systems for kind of a different mental shift as an author. And that's, I think that that's what Plotter can become, perhaps for some people.
Mhm.
Maybe you are plotting in Google Sheets or on a Google Doc or possibly on a tablet, Microsoft Word document or something, having it all in one place and organize in a novel like manner, which is what Plotter does, right? It's intentionally formatted to be novel like. Then it'll save you steps for one in searching, but two, it'll aid you long term. I mean, Microsoft documents can only help you so long. At some point, you just don't even want to open that Bible anymore because it's overwhelming. Uh,
Yeah.
Hopefully, Plotter is not too overwhelming, even with copious amounts of information in it because of the organization.
Well, yeah, I tell people. So I've got a book series I started writing with another author, and he had to drop out because of family health. So I'm looking for replacement authors if you're a mystery author interested. Anyway, but it's called the Capital City Murders series, right? And even writers can do the math for that. There's 50 states and 50 capital cities, so you can figure out how many of these there's going to be. Right now, I have 20. I have 15 of them done. I'm almost done with number 16, and I have 25 of them plotted in a single plotter file
Wow.
with all of the characters, all of the methods of murder, and you can imagine all of the different settings and locations because each one, of course, has a state capitol building, which is the central part of the story. Each one has a mystery, which happens different places. There's suspects, there's killers, there's secondary characters in 23 different things in the same plotter file. It is not overwhelming um, because because I have an organizational system for one thing, which is very helpful to speed up that process. But also just because intuitively Plotter is designed to house your series stuff in. So I can go and look at every character in the series and realize in book one I have a Mary, and in book 13 I have another Mary. Maybe I shouldn't use Mary again,
Mm,
as
hmm
a name. You know what I mean? Different things like that. So when you talk about, 5 books and a series, well, that's one thing. When you start getting up to 20, 30, like I published over 30 novels, right? Apart from this series, anyway, that's a whole other story. Um, Lots of books, right? And so some of them that I published years ago, like I remember the main characters, but secondary characters' names, let alone what they looked like, I have no
mm,
clue,
hmm
right? So in order for me to revisit those books, I have to go back and create a series Bible. And I really don't have a desire to do that. That doesn't speak to my creative inner nerd. It doesn't really help me out a lot. you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's valuable because as your career goes along, you're going to have stuff in the past that you're going to want to look back at eventually. Because I would like to recover that series and revamp that initial series that really launched my career. But to do that requires another set of work to go back and look at that again because I didn't have the tools then that I do now.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. And that's the great thing about systems like this is keeping an open mind to their use will only aid authors. I know, we won't get into the AI game, but artificial intelligence and all of these other systems that are being developed for writers, it's something that writers really need to pay attention to because to ignore them will potentially ultimately hurt you rather than aid you. So taking the time to review them and see, hey, how could this really, is this worth the spend, particularly since a lot of them aren't even subscription. I mean, you can subscribe to Plottr, but there's lifetime options for purchase. So, it could be an investment that is worth it for you long term. So take a look at it, play around with it, and really see if it's something that will help you. So in terms of Plottr for me, I don't know yet. I need to play around with it a little bit more. And it's mainly the time and writing factors for me. The reason I don't plot isn't because I don't like to necessarily, as much as it takes the fun out of writing for me. A lot of people, I know there's some other pantsers that feel the same way, but for me, I don't want to know where the story's going yet. That's the fun of writing. And so if I plan it
yeah,
out, I've written it. I don't want to write the book anymore. I already know what's going to happen. So that's why I don't. And having the series Bible post writing though, or possibly like a reverse outline, is something that I have only recently been doing, and I found a lot of value in that. And Plottr would be the place to plug it
yeah,
in. So there's
yeah.
advantages to even me.
For people that are straight discovery writers and don't want to know where the story's going, absolutely. Then write your first draft, finish it out, write your first draft. Because the other thing I tell people, Plottr is a writing tool, right?
Hmm.
What it's for is to get you writing. Like it's not the Plottr file, the beautiful Plottr file you create in that beautiful series Bible is not the point.
Hmm.
I show me your beautiful Plottr file, right? It'll make my heart slightly happy. You want to make it even happier, show me the Plottr file you created and the first draft you finished because you used it.
Hmm.
Or the draft that you finished, the Plottr file you used to revise that draft, and the finished product you have that's a better story, that's beautiful, that helps you keep track of that series Bible, enhances your writing career. And then I'm really happy. I beautiful Plottr files make me smile, but that's not the point. Those are not the point. The point is finish your book. The point is to write. The reason I use Plottr is it makes me faster and more efficient in my writing
Hmm.
process, not because I love plot structure and planning so much. I do, but I love them as part of a larger process,
Sure.
if
Yep.
that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it's just applying it to your mind and your writing process and looking at it with an open mind. So I agree. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
applications for Plottr, and it's worth there's trial periods, so feel free to try it
Oh,
out.
yeah.
I would love to talk about some of the boring technical aspects. It's just to because they're necessary, right? We have to understand a little bit of how it works. So from what I understand, there is a desktop application and it is not OS specific. So you can use it on any
Yep.
operating system, whether you're a Windows or a Mac guy, whoever you are, or girl, I should
Yeah.
say. But what about cloud? Like, are there automatic syncs? Are there any assurances that data won't be lost once you've created this beautiful Plottr file? What does that look like from a user perspective?
So from a user perspective, there's two different options right now. The first one is the desktop option. And what I recommend with that is that you save to some kind of a cloud service, whatever
Mm,
your one of choice is. Now,
sure.
with our mobile apps, they're developing a Dropbox integration that's similar to what Scrivener looks like.
Hmm.
How that actually works? Good question. Don't know. It's a Dropbox integration and it works pretty well. And I've used the Scrivener one. I used it this year because I was traveling in November when I was doing Nano. And if it's anything like that one, it actually works really well, right? You just have to be paying attention, be cognizant, like you are with any backup system, right?
Mm, yep.
But with the desktop app, what I usually did before, now we have a web option, but before that, I saved everything to OneDrive, right? And it's synced across OneDrive. You just have to make sure that you don't have the same file open on two different devices.
Mm,
Otherwise, you encounter what we call versioning issues. Again, technical term, don't want to explain it, but what I know is it screws up your file. Okay, that's the part that I know because I'm not a code guy, right? But now we have the web version, which is called Plottr Pro. That version is a little more expensive, but the advantages you have is, first of all, you have no device limits. With the other one, you have a certain number of devices per license, right? You can do a one device license, a three device license, right? You can do annual or lifetime, whatever you want. And annual, to explain the subscription, it can be a subscription, but what it means is at the end of that year, you don't lose Plottr and all your files go disappear into the wild, right? What happens is you still keep Plottr, you just don't get updates. Well, because we're constantly updating things, I don't advise people to not get updates. You know, it's like having
Sure.
some other software not getting updates. Like my friend that's on Windows 7 Professional still, um, which
Impressive.
is which is impressive. It's impressive. It's kind of frightening, but it's impressive. Right. But anyway, okay. So all that aside, so you don't have to worry about that type of thing with Plottr Pro because basically you can use the desktop app still and it still syncs with your web app, but your web app everything syncs across devices. But what's even more beautiful about that is you can have two people working on the same file at the same time.
Thanks. Okay.
So I'm launching a new series next year. I'm working with a co-author. So instead of sending versions of our Plottr file back and forth, we both work on the same file at the same time. So we're sharing the same Plottr file. If you work with an editor like me, who basically says, if you don't have a Plottr file, by the time you're done working with me, you will have one. Because once I tear your book apart and put it on a plot line, I can say, hey, there's a plot hole. And you can't deny it because you can see it. It's right there. It's very visual, right? So I use that as a tool with my clients, right? But if you're working with an editor and you have Plottr Pro, you can go back and forth and work on the same file at the same time without having to worry about sending versions back and forth. So that is super valuable. So there are both options. You can go web option, you can go desktop option. You can go desktop option and later upgrade to web option or whatever you want to do, depending on whether you feel like, depending on how you use the program. I like the web option, number one, because of collaboration, and number two, because of when I travel. When I'm traveling to writers' conferences and stuff like that, I basically can open my Plottr files on my iPad in the browser and work in my computer, and then I have my second screen. And because my home setup is just insane. I look like a Russian hacker, in the movie. So it's so obviously I can't take that with me, but I can take my iPad and I can arrange myself so I can work in a similar way when I'm on the
Sure.
road. So it's really just up to how you want to use Plottr, but that's the technical aspects of saving things. I tell people, save things to the cloud. I am a backup I am a double triple backup guy. I lost part of the novel once. We don't talk about it unless you buy me drinks, and they're got to be expensive ones, and then I'll tell that story. But
Yes, I
yeah,
can
those
relate.
those
I
things
have
are.
lost a novel too. I lost 30,000 words of a novel, so
It
we
is
won't get into it.
it is so it is so painful. But anyway, so I'm a backup. I'm a backup freak, and this is that's part of the reason why. So I like those technical aspects of things too. So backup super important. They happen automatically. The cloud backup thing, again, it saves like every certain number of seconds, and it's a small number that programmers tell me. I don't know what it is. It happens really fast.
Awesome.
So
So there you go. There's the boring technical stuff. You're as safe as probably possible. Obviously, no system is perfect, but there's a lot of measures in place. So those of you listening, obviously backup. There's nothing wrong with clicking save multiple times and saving it in multiple places, but there are sync options, right? If
yeah.
that's something that you're worried about with something like Plottr. So it just gives you peace of mind if you're using a system like this. So for you, I mean, you're here obviously talking about Plottr. You use Plottr. You are an advocate of Plottr, but as a writer, why would you recommend Plottr? You've talked a little bit about how you use it in your writing process, but why would you personally, as an author, recommend it?
Well, I have my top two reasons that I always tell people, and this is my first one is efficiency. So for
Mhm.
me, like I write for a living, right? And like we were talking about before we started, like that doesn't mean that I have hours a day to write. What it
Mhm.
means is my writing time is still very structured. You have to do lots of things outside of that writing time. So that time is very valuable to me, and I want to spend it the best way I possibly can. So I have worked to develop efficiency so I can write as many words as possible in a day, get as many things as possible done in a day, and still maintain somewhat of a life, small, insignificant outside of writing. But
Mm,
it's something that I need, right? So, but for those of you like that are like you, that are like working a day job, I mean, when I was working a day job, my writing time was so sacred. I would set a bulldog outside the door and not let anybody in to interrupt that time, right? You have to train your wife and your kids and your dogs and everybody. This is my writing time. Get out, get
mhm,
away, right? And so you want that time to be as efficient as possible. The other thing is what I find is that I find using Plottr makes writing more fun. Like it's part of the fun part for me of going. I'm like, I love revision, and people like, I hate revision. And I'm like, that's because you're not allowing your creativity to play when you're doing revision. You're restricting it too much. Oh, I've got to make it like this. No, you don't. Just play with it and have fun with it. Have fun with the entire process. And I want the entire process to be fun because this job, the wider job of being a full time writer, is one of the most difficult and amazing jobs that you will ever do. But it's one of the
mhm,
most challenging jobs that there is. If you don't care if you can depend on your income, if you can, I mean, if you don't care about benefits, there's a million different things, right, that go into it. So it's an incredibly difficult job. So it's way too difficult not for it not to be fun because there are easier ways to make money. Um, lots of them, lots of
mhm.
them. You can buy an RV, learn some chemistry, buy some car washes to launder money, do something your family can really get behind. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just this is an incredibly difficult job. So I tell people, efficiency is one, fun is the other. I worked really hard to make what I do now what it is and make it fun and make this a thing that I can do for a living and still live with myself. And so, to do that, there's just things I put in place, and that's why I would recommend that for you. There's many ways you can make it an integral part of your writing process. And if you check out our YouTube channel, we have lots of those ways. We have a program that's called Thursdays with Troy. It was on Thursdays. This guy named Troy hosted it. Probably know who he is by now. And I interviewed all
Seems
kinds of
nice.
authors. Yeah, seems like an all right guy. And I interview all kinds of authors about how they use Plottr, and every one of them is different.
Mhm.
Every one of them is they have taken it and they've applied it to their own process in a completely different way. Some of them I would have never thought of. My brain does not work that way. I wouldn't have thought of that, but it obviously works for them, and it's amazing. So, just there's probably a way that you can use this tool in your writing process. It's a matter of you figuring out what that way is for you.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. We'll have to put some links to the YouTube channel and of course to Plottr and whatnot in the show notes. But yeah, we're running short on time. Is there anything else about Plottr or anything else that people might need to know before we close out?
I would just say this is, give it a shot. There's a free trial, and there's a 30-day money back guarantee. If you try it and you don't like it, just tell us you didn't like it. Tell us why, because that's kind of useful information. Um, but then just tell us, and we'll give you your money back. We have the one of the biggest things is that we have a robust roadmap and a feature suggestion area on our website, and probably over 90% of the features that Plottr has now came from people like you
Mm,
who
mhm.
said, I would like Plottr to be able to do, and it all started with Cameron and I going back and forth about different features that we would like. And then we just invited more and more people into that process of, hey, this is something I would really like Plottr to do. I think it'd be awesome if it did it. And we say, we might be able to do that. So, this is for you. It's a writing software that's for you. We want to develop a product that works better for as many writers as we possibly can. So check it out. If you become confused or anything like that, we have a really robust Facebook group. If you're not on Facebook, I tell people if you want an answer to a question, look me up. Google me. If you Google Troy Lambert, nothing comes up. Your internet is down, and you need to contact your service provider. Because I'm all over the
Should
Googles.
be all over.
As my son said when he was middle school, he came home and he's like, "Dad, you're all over the Googles," and I'm like, "Yes, I'm all over the Googles. Thank you." So yeah, I'm all over the Googles. You can find me and get in touch with me. Get in touch with Plottr. Plottr.com is our website. And if you have a question, ask, and we are always willing to find an answer for you.
Awesome. I'm already going to give you a kudos on something. I'm colorblind. Um, and like you'd be shocked how many online systems like Google, and the Google does it now, but when you hover over the different colors, it only gives you the hex code. It's like I'm
Oh,
colorblind.
really?
I don't know what color that is. You actually list what the colors are. So
Yeah,
I
that's actually
appreciate that. Except your
that.
default colors are hex codes. So some of yours are only hex codes. A majority of them are listed. So, but I can do nothing with a hex code. I'm colorblind. I have to Google the
Yeah.
hex code to know what color it is. So, but there you go. Pat on the back for you on for that one. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
awesome. Yeah, we have one of our developers that actually mentioned that to us, and I think he's the one. I don't know. He's probably the one that did the things that fix that, whatever those are.
It was
Again,
one of the
code.
first things
I
they
don't know.
check because it's frustrating when you go to use a color and it's like I don't know what
I
colors
have
those
no
are.
idea what that is.
So,
Yeah.
but in any case, thanks so much for the time. I'll go give it a try, and yeah, I'll have to do this again sometime and perhaps talk about you as an author and
Yeah.
learn a little bit more about your writing.
You betcha. We could have another show and talk about me, and we could talk about AI too, if you want
Oh, there's
to,
also
because
so much
I
fun.
yeah, I'm writing an article about it right now, and it's super interesting. Getting different people's perspective and different writers' perspective on it. It's super fun.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. Well, thanks so much for today.
All right, you betcha. Thank you. All right.